Hi, Alex Fensky here, lead agent for the Chicago South and Homes team, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about being a part of a team and what that means financially. This is really similar to a conversation that we find in the real estate business that we have with a lot of seller clients when we have a commission discussion, and they say, "Well, hey, someone else will do it for lower commission," and we know that if we can actually perform better through our marketing, through our negotiations, and through all the things that we do, even if we're charging more money, we can actually get that seller a net of more money, even though they would pay another agent less who isn't necessarily going to do the same things we do to get them a superior result. So when we talk to sellers and they say, well, I want this lower commission, and we ask the question, is it the commission you're paying the agent that matters most, or is it how much you net? And in the real estate business, when we talk about the team model, it's the same thing. A lot of people see teams and they say, well, geez, if I join a team, I'm going to have to pay part of my commissions to the team. Therefore, I'm losing something. I'm giving up part of my money. And yet the question is, well, what are you gaining? And does it actually allow you to net more money? Nobody would do it if all it was just extra costs. I mean, there would be no such thing as a team. And yet our entire economy is built on teams. In fact, if you want to talk about percentages and profit margins, there's an often cited statistic says that even though, hey, our real estate profit margins are really high, Amazon's profit margin, they say, is only 1%. Well, their 1% is based on revenue of like trillions of dollars. So I'd love to have their 1% rather than my 40% as a rainmaker of a team. I would take Amazon's 1% all day. And so when we talk about joining a team, what we want to answer is the question of, how can I net more money? What does that look like for me to net more money, even though I'm participating in a different scenario than I am as a solo agent? So that's what we're going to take a look at. We're going to make two different columns here. We're going to take a look at what it's like to run a solo agent business, what some of the costs are and the profit margins, and then we'll do the same for a member of a team. So if I can fit all this on one side of the board, that'll be amazing, and we'll call that a win for the day. We're going to use some round numbers. So we're going to say, what does it take to net $100,000 after costs? Okay, so we're looking for $100,000 as a solo agent. And we're going to ask ourselves, what does that look like? Well, the basic economic model that we use, we call it the 30-30-40 model, but for a solo agent, it's a little bit different because your profit margins are higher when you're not running a team. So what we would say is that your gross commission income is 100% of your gross revenue. That's what that means. And you're going to have two categories of expenses that you incur. You're going to have cost of sales and operating expense. And then you're going to have your net profit. Okay, so cost of sales for a solo agent in our capped commission model is probably only going to be about 15%, unless you have a lot of referral-based business. It could be higher. Your operating expense at this level of production that we're going to go through shouldn't exceed 30%, which means that your net profit is 55% of your gross commission. So one way to look at that would be to say, if you had $100,000 in gross commission, after all your expenses, you would take home about $55,000 before tax. Everything we talk here is before tax. So then the question is, well then, what do I need to do in order for my net to be $100,000? Okay? And when you back out the numbers and you divide things into place, and I'm going to use my cheat sheet here, make sure I get all my numbers right, you would need to gross $182,000. Okay, so what will happen is you'll gross $182,000. Your cost of sale at 15% is going to be about $27,000, and then your operating expense is going to be about $55,000. Now, if those numbers, those expense numbers seem high to you, and you're not doing that level of production yet, then just trust me that you'll find out what all those expenses are as you begin to see what it takes to be able to generate and service enough of the leads to get to that level of production. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about what are all those things, or at least maybe not all of them, but at least some of them. So what are the operating expenses? We're going to break down what this is. Operating expenses are all the things that you pay money for on an ongoing basis, except what you pay when you close a deal. The expenses that you pay only when you close a transaction, That's called cost of sales. So that's things like your company split, your company dollar royalty, referral fees, and that's about it for cost of sale. Operating expense is everything else. So what are some of the operating expenses that a solo agent incurs to get to the level of production where they're grossing about $182,000? Well, of course, you have all your basics. So you've got your board dues, you got your MLS fees, you've got lots of different marketing expenses, whatever it is that you do for marketing to drive that many leads. You got office supplies, paper, toner, printing, all that stuff adds up when you're doing that quantity. If you're renting a desk at the office, a lot of times to get that level of production, you need to have a workspace that you're going to every day. This training and education, you're going to have to learn how to do this stuff that it takes to get to there. So you're going to need to attend training and education. Now, pretty much everything we do at the local level here is no cost, but you're going to go to events like family reunion or a mega camp, or you're going to participate in regional training or anything outside of the company. That's all going to cost you. Aside from that, coaching. I have several coaches. I have 3 coaches right now, and the typical coaching contract is about $1,000 a month. I know that's what I pay. So that certainly adds up when you're looking at coaching. If you're doing a lot of phone prospecting, you're probably using a dialer. That's 3 figures a month. Another big expense these days is it's become very popular and effective to have client events, to be able to build and deepen relationships with the people in your database. And those client events, we offset part of the cost with sponsorships, but it doesn't gobble up the whole thing. So you got a cost of client events. Anything that you're going to do, such as direct mail marketing. So that could be things like even just postcards. We do a lot of invitations to our client events. They go through the mail calendars or sports calendars for the season. That's all there. In addition, you got signs, you got lock boxes, right? Cards, like business cards. You got photography on your listings. There's probably some other things, but there's a lot of costs to operating this business, and that's why you see the operating expense at the level that it is, because all this stuff adds up. Your cost of sale, again, is just your split to the company and any referral fees that you might pay. So that's how the solo agent business functions. Now, the next question we want to ask is, because now we've got to figure out how much time it takes to accomplish this, right? We know what the revenue has to be in order for you to net $100,000, but how much time does it take? So believe it or not, we've got some research on that. And so let's start with this. Let's say we've got our $182,000 in revenue, and we need to answer the question, how many units, how many transactions is that closed? Well, let's first take an average commission amount of $6,000, and that's going to tell us how many units we need to close. And it works out to 30 closed. So you're going to have to close 30 sales. Now, our research shows that it takes about, on average, 60 hours to do everything it takes to run your real estate business, generate service leads, close everything out, submit all your paperwork, just all the stuff that it takes, not just contract to close, but everything else with goals and planning and lead generation and all that. It takes about 60 hours each, okay? So if we take 60 hours each times our 30 closed units, we're going to end up with 1,800 hours worth of work. So that's how many hours it would take you over the course of a year to run a business that closes 30 units on average. The next step here is we're going to figure out the dollar per hour earnings. How much money do you earn for the time you spend? And so what that means here is you're going to net $100,000. So we're going to take your $100,000 net profit and divide that by 1,800 hours, and that's dollars per hour, and that's going to work out to be about $55 per hour. Net after all costs besides income tax. That's not a bad gig. Especially given that you don't have to go to extensive additional schooling. Now there's a very low barrier to entry. This is really not a bad gig at all. $55 an hour, okay? And that's why real estate is a great business. So what we're going to do is we're going to work through the same thing for an agent on a team, and look at how the money varies a little bit. Now I'm going to get fancy. We're going to use a different color. I'm going to use blue. All right, so let's talk about this as a team. Now, as a team, on a team member, your expenses are going to be very different. So what we're going to see here is we're going to go 100,000 on a team. Now, make no mistake, this is not 100,000 as the rainmaker of a team. Those profit margins are much lower because you're taking a lot more risk. But this is as a team member. Okay. Now, what we're going to look at here is your GCI after team split, and then we're going to have same deal, cost of sale, which is your company stuff, operating expense, and your net profit. Well, here's what we know. Rather than using percentages for a team member, we can actually just use dollar amounts because the expenses are not all that much. Now, for your operating expenses as a team member, the team is actually going to be paying for almost all this stuff. So the team is paying for all the marketing, office supplies, rent, training, education, coaching, dialer, client events, mailers, lock boxes, cards, signs, photography. The only thing you're paying for as a team member is your board and your MLS dues and your monthly agent bill to the office. And that stuff adds up to right about $2,500 per year. So we're writing $2,500 per year for your operating expense. Now, your cost of sale after team split is going to be whatever you owe to the company through company dollar and royalties, a couple different commission plans. What I'm going to use here is a half cap of $9,500 and your royalty of $3,000. The royalty is always the same; it's always $3,000. At least that's the cap on it. And so for that, $9,500 and $3,000, that's going to be $2,500. So your grand total operating expense and cost of sales, your total expense as a team member, is $15,000. Well, if we're going to net profit the same amount, $100,000, then we need to add those two on and realize we need to generate $115,000 in GCI after team split. So there you go. That's the revenue target. Now we're going to do the same thing we did here and figure out how many units is that closed. Now, for most transactions, for example, a buyer agent on a team, you're going to be at a 50-50 team split. Now, that's going to vary depending on what work you do, whether the person was in your SOI, things like that. But on average, this is going to be a typical transaction. So with that, what that means is that with that average commission of $6,000 that we talked about, $3,000 is going to go to you, and $3,000 is going to go to the team. Remember, the team's paying for and taking care of all this stuff, all the contract to close, time with salaries, there are people to manage the database, the marketing, lead gen. That's what they're paying out of their $3,000. You as the solo agent, as the team member, are going to also get $3,000 from that closing on the 50-50 split. So let's do it again, just like we did. If you're going to have $115,000 in revenue after team split, and your average revenue after team split is $3,000 each, well, how many transactions do we need to close as a team member? That's 38. Now, at first glance, you might say, well, hey, that's actually 8 more transactions than I had to close as a solo agent. But remember, you're only doing at absolute most, 40% of the work relating to the transaction because the team is doing all the other stuff, not to mention paying for all the other stuff. So yes, it's more deals, but you're doing only 40%, maybe 20% of the work for each of those, as opposed to doing 100% of the work in this scenario. And this is why we're doing this. Let's see how this plays out. In the research, as I mentioned, you're looking at that team member in terms of the 60 hours that it takes for a deal to get closed. 20% is the measurement. They say a team member closing a deal should count on doing about 20% of the work. I'm actually going to estimate high and say 40%, because I don't want to use anything that can be perceived as well, hey, that's not realistic. So we're actually going to double it. We're going to say, what if the team member does 40% of the work relating to the transaction? Well, if you have 60 hours, then you have 40% of the work. How many hours is that per transaction? Well, that's going to be 24 hours. So instead of spending 60 hours on each of your deals, you're going to spend 24. All right. Now, our 38 closed transactions, how much time is that going to take us? At 24 hours each. Total, that's going to be 912 hours. All right. So you can see already that's a lot less hours worked. It's roughly half of the 1,800 that we said over here. And I just want you to think about all of that. We got an average of about 19 hours just from contract to close. And that's something that on a team, your closing coordinator is going to take care of. Things like database management and updating, that's very time consuming. The prospect of planning a client event, if you're going to have 100 plus people show up at something, you think about all the planning that has to go into it, from the marketing of it, setting up, handling contracts, promoting everything, registering everybody, setting up the event. That's a lot of work. Okay, so when I say that you're going to do 40% of the work and the team's going to do 60%, I can promise you it's at least that. But let's now go to the dollar per hour. In this example, we're netting the same $100,000 after expenses and before taxes, except this time we're only spending 912 hours to do that. So your dollar per hour actually works out to be 110. So what do we see happen? We go, well, hey, I'm joining a team, and now I'm going to be, on most of my deals, I'm going to have a 50-50 split. My gosh, I'm giving away half my money. Well, you could look at it that way, but you're also giving away more than half of the work to run the business. And what ends up happening is you can earn double the hourly rate, $110 an hour versus $55 an hour. And that means one of two things. Either you can work the same number of hours, you could work your 1,800 hours, and you'll actually make double the money, or you could work half the hours and net the same money. Which would you prefer? Maybe somewhere in between? I don't know. But and of course, it depends on what the team standard is for production, because there's accountability, and we're going to want somebody that's a good fit and wants to achieve the goals that fit within that system. And I can tell you that something like this, a team member come in and close 38 deals, that's pretty solid. And it's very, very, very possible when you have the team generating lots of leads, helping you with coaching you around it, training you around it, providing all the systems around it, contract to close support, sending everybody in your database to our client events. You can absolutely close 38 deals a year. In fact, you really should be closing at least that much, honestly. So when you think about this, not only can you have a higher dollar per hour income, and again, either choose the same time you would have spent and make more money, or spend less time and make the same money, you're also carrying a lot less risk, because over here, there's a lot of expenses coming out, all these operating expenses, regardless of how many transactions close. And as a solo agent, you have to pay for this stuff, no matter how many. You could have a blank month, and if you're paying rent, you're paying for your office supplies and coaching, nobody's going to be like, okay, we'll take your check next month. They don't do that. You're going to have to pay for that stuff no matter what. And if you want to ramp up lead generation and either buy leads or spend more money on advertising and marketing and lead generation, it takes some time for that to start coming back to you and cultivate those leads until they eventually turn into closings. So in this model with the team, you're not laying out any of that. All you're laying out cash-wise is your board and MLS dues and your monthly fee. So you're running a business that has a lot less risk. Lastly, you're getting things here that you likely wouldn't be getting elsewhere. In terms of the level of coaching, accountability, training, and support, coverage for when you're out or when you're sick. You got people around you that are gonna step in for you. When you're a solo agent, any of that stuff is available, and it's always going to cost you money, and it's always going to require some legwork to go and try and get it figured out and put it into place. So, so this is why being a part of a team when there's the right fit is really a win-win for everybody involved. And the last thing I want to stress is what I just mentioned, which is the right fit. A lot of times what we see out there in the real estate marketplace is people building teams, or I'm going to even say teams, that are not structured according to the models of best practices. We've researched the heck out of what makes a team work and what makes it win-win for everybody that's a part of it. And we know what those formulas are. We know what the compensation should be, just like I'm telling you here. We have all that stuff documented, and a lot of people choose not to follow that. They choose to go and try to reinvent the wheel, and they run into predictable problems. And one of the major problems is people making sure that the rainmaker, the lead agent of the team, making sure that they're putting the right person into the right opportunity. Albert Einstein, one of my favorite quotes, and it comes from Albert Einstein, he says, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid. And unfortunately, that happens so much, not just in real estate, but everywhere, where someone's just in the wrong role. Now, for you, maybe being a solo agent, it comes with a lot of stuff that you don't enjoy, or it drains the energy out of you, or maybe you're just not good at it. Nobody's good at everything. So the one caveat that makes all of this stuff work is that the team is delivering on its value proposition, paying for the stuff they're supposed to be paying for, providing the support and the leads that they're supposed to be providing, the coaching, the training, the accountability, providing all of that, and then putting the right person in the right seat on the bus. When those stars are aligned, this becomes very possible, and far more from there. So I just want you to take a look at this, think about and consider the financial opportunity of joining a team, and as always, reach out with any questions that we can answer for you.